Welcome to Consumer Law, What Is It Good For? Which it won't surprise you perhaps is not a goal hanger podcast production. However, in a similar vein, I will aim to give you some insight not into football or history, but into legal disputes involving cars by looking at the law in action through real life cases. And in this video, I'm going to look at Sam's case, which involves his Ford 1 litre EcoBoost car, which is fitted with a wet belt. And in doing so, we're going to look at issues involving car finance, we're going to look at the rules of evidence, and we're going to look at the burden of proof. Incidentally, the facts in Sam's case are not unique and are common in many other vehicles that use wet belts, including the Ford Ranger, the Ford Transit, the Vauxhall, Peugeot, and Citroen 1.2 Puretech engine. So in this episode, in 4 words: wet belt, misfire, finance, and evidence. Firstly, by way of a background to Sam's case, Sam bought his Focus 1 litre EcoBoost from a Ford specialist dealer. And he bought it by way of a hire purchase agreement with Northridge Finance. At the time, the car had 13,000 miles on the clock and had been serviced as it should have been from you, in accordance with the manufacturer service schedule. And I think he paid about £20,000 for it. A year later, absolutely as it should have been, he took it back to the Ford specialist to have it serviced. And then 2 years after that, so it's a 2-year service cycle with this car, he took it back to the same dealer and they again carried out the service. But while it was there, the specialist told Sam that the engine was making an unusual noise, and they recommended that they carried out some investigations to find out what the cause of it is. And during that investigation, they found that the wet belt was missing some of its teeth, and that the remnants, little rubber remnants of this wet belt, were found blocking the oil strainer. And on advice, Sam agreed to have the timing belt replaced and the tensioner. Everything was okay until about 6 months later. Sam brought the car back to the specialist dealer because the engine was misfiring. And the Ford specialist carried out a compression test on the cylinders and found that one of those cylinders had no compression at all. And they then carried out a further inspection of the cylinders using a bore scope, an endoscope, which revealed that the cylinder liners were heavily scored, looked like an ice skating rink. And because of that, the engine required replacement. Unsurprisingly, even though Sam had the car by that time at 3 years and had driven 20,000 miles, if memory serves, he complained to Northridge and said, look, this car just hasn't lasted as long as it should have done. I've only done 20,000 miles in 3 years, and I want you to repair it. Northridge wrote back, and I'll quote to him, and said, due to the time frame since ownership, and according to the Consumer Rights Act 2015, the onus is on you, the consumer, to prove the issues you are presently facing were present, or evident from point of purchase. We also take into consideration the mileage covered and the service history. They went on to say, we need material evidence to be in a better position to help you, and we recommend using ACE or the AA or the RAC. Others are available, but we can't accept inspection from dealerships. So this case, Sam's case, boiled down to 3 aspects. One is about the Financial Conduct Authority regulations, which concern car finance, the rules of evidence, namely what sort of evidence is required and what is it that Northridge are asking, and then the relevant legal principles. So we have to apply it in that order. So first things first, we'll look at the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA rules. And here, the starting point is that when you make a complaint to your finance company, they must investigate that complaint competently, diligently, and impartially, obtaining further information if necessary. So we can see straight away that Northridge haven't done that. They've simply packed Sam off to go and get his own evidence, for him to carry out his own investigations, which is not what the rules say. It's different. If this wasn't a car finance case, then in large part Northridge would be right, but it is. And to be honest, because the circumstances of Sam's case suggest that the engine has failed prematurely and not through the want of servicing, Northridge should have commissioned the expert report rather than sending Sam on his way. And in that respect, they really were creating a bit of an obstruction to him accessing the law and his legal rights. Secondly, and in relation to the rules of evidence, evidence is, perhaps again unsurprisingly, anything that makes a fact in issue more or less likely. And that could include witness testimony, your word, what you saw, what happened. It could be circumstantial evidence, who was there at the time, who wasn't. It could be similar fact evidence. Are there any number of cases that are similar to this one? And bearing in mind, someone like Northridge Finance see a lot of car cases. It's a big lender. So this won't be the first Ford Focus they've come across, let alone the first wet belt case they come along. And then, of course, there's documentary evidence and expert evidence. There's all manner of evidence is the point. But in this case, Northridge do something that's a bit sneaky. They want to limit Sam's ability to prove his own case by saying, no, the only source of evidence we're going to accept is expert evidence from one of these sources, not from a dealership, not from Ford, not from the Ford specialist who inspected the vehicle and carried out the compression test, incidentally. They won't accept that. It has to come from an expert, and they recommend these experts, which can't be right. The truth is that what we often do in these sort of cases, and many cases, is we're looking at something that we call competing causation. So we look at all the possible causes, all the suspects, if you want to look at it that way, and we assess each one to find out which ones we can discount. So we can discount the cause of this engine failure has anything to do with poor servicing, because this car's been serviced like clockwork. So we just look at those considerations, weigh them up, and that in itself will give us a pretty good idea of what the cause of this engine failure is. And in this case, it really is a process of deductive logic. For example, we know that this vehicle has a wet belt. We don't have to look it up. We know because the Ford specialist who supplied the vehicle replaced the wet belt. We know, because this is a matter of similar fact, that wet belts in general are prone to delaminate and degrade and often require replacement way before the manufacturer's recommended replacement interval. In this case, we know already that the wet belt had degraded because the Ford specialist told us that. The wet belt had degraded and they found debris from the wet belt in the oil strainer. We know that if you restrict the oil flow through the oil strainer, that will cause some problems, that this vehicle has to have a regular and proper flow of oil and oil pressure to operate properly. We also know that the cylinder liners in this engine, the cylinders, are coated with a thin film of oil, and that is there to prevent friction and allow the pistons to glide smoothly up and down inside the cylinders. And we know that if this cylinder liner is not properly lubricated, there will be friction and there will be scoring in consequence, like an ice rink from that side of things. So if we then extrapolate that further, that the seal between the piston and the cylinder depends upon the smooth, uninterrupted contact between the piston and the cylinder. If the cylinder is scored, the fine little line scored down there, that creates a way for the air to escape. So they're no longer airtight. And therefore there won't be sufficient compression if it lets the air through. So we can say with some certainty that the wet belt is undoubtedly a potential suspect for the cause of the engine failure. Everything fits perfectly. So we just then have to consider whether there's any other possible cause of this engine failure. We know it can't be Sam. No one's accused Sam. It can't be to do with the servicing. It was done impeccably. It can't be to do the servicing was not carried out to the manufacturer's specification because it was carried out by a Ford specialist, ex-Ford dealer. The book is stamped exactly as it should be. There's a fully documented history of all the oil that was used, the filters and so on and so forth. So the reality is there is no other possible cause of the engine failure. It must have been this domino effect, starting with a manufacturing defect really in relation to the wet belt that caused the engine failure. Pretty straightforward, you'd think, but despite there being innumerable cases, and there's no doubt at all that Northridge have had a few, I've worked on more than a few, I can assure you, they've not looked at similar cases. So what we have to do now is apply that evidence to the law, and it's pretty straightforward. So in contract law, I mean, we're looking at consumer rights, but contract law in general, the innocent party, Sam, has to prove that the cause of the engine failure was a latent defect, something that was developing or an embryonic form when he bought it, and B, that the engine was, and the wet belt really, was not suitably durable. It didn't last as long as a reasonable person would expect, or anybody else in the business, how long the manufacturer would expect it. So we know the wet belt degraded prematurely. It required replacement way before it was due. So we know that's a sort of manufacturing defect or inherent design defect. We also know that although Sam had driven 20,000 miles, the total mileage was about 35,000 miles. That's way sooner than anyone would expect that engine to fail. So we can say with some certainty that Northridge are liable. No doubt about that at all. Unfortunately, in this case, not uncommonly, Northridge were incredibly intransigent and would not accept Sam's complaint and decline that complaint. He had to come to us, and he did that because we'd done a video like this, recorded a video. Alex's case, which was about a wet belt snapping in a Ford Transit, which we'd successfully enabled a rejection of. He came to us, and unfortunately we had to do some work for him. It did cost him, I'm afraid, but nevertheless what did happen is he successfully rejected the vehicle, successfully got his money back, and he was able to go on and buy another vehicle. So this is all about finance company, evidence, and applying the law correctly. So if you've got a case with a vehicle that has a wet belt, that's not snapped, which is all too often the case, but is exhibiting symptoms such as a misfire, and perhaps the garage has been back and changed the spark plugs, for example, looked at the leads, that go to the spark plugs, various tests, and then have not carried out an inspection into the cylinder liners, that's your next step. If the engine has failed, next step is going to be to check the oil strainers to see if there's sign of debris from the wet belt. And if all else fails, you give us a call here on 0333 700 7676. I hope this video has been useful. Thanks very much.